Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Field Stories. We are here with Michaela for once. Let's go.
Yay!
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Very happy, very hot and baking in the sun, but happy to be back.
Oh,
Nice.
that's really good.
Now, I think it's my first time recording in Massachusetts and like fully present. So
Yes.
moved and starting my new job and fully here. So living the
Nice.
best turtle queen life.
Well, it's good to have you, like actually the whole you, not just like
Yeah,
one
right.
of every 5 words being able to be legible.
I know. Oh, Lord.
No.
Yeah, how are you all?
Well, I mean, Nick, how are you? Because it's probably fast. It looks like you're in the same place as always. How are you?
Yeah, well, I'm the same. I mean, the university ending parties continue, all the celebrations. So, if I look a bit dreary throughout the episode, just know it's all for a good cause. my celebration. So
Being your liver in your 20s, it's a very noble English cause. I love it.
actually, it's like a badge of honor. So
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
how about you guys?
Well, my rotation of locations. I mean, we should count how many locations I've been in on this. People think I'm like a world traveler, which I don't really think I am, but I just happen to be in different places all the time. I am in the west coast of my fair country, Canada. I'm very proud. Feels good to be back. I'm in Vancouver right now, in a hostel, which like it's in a shared room, which is empty right now, thank God. But you never know what's going to happen. So at the moment, we're just enjoying that it's quiet. And just here for a couple days before Tuesday, I head out to the north, like I guess north central coast, I guess you could say, of British Columbia, kind of halfway between Vancouver and Alaska, and out in an island to start some surveys for 2.5 weeks with Wilderness International. So this is my last weekend of civilization before we start camping in the coastal barrier islands of British Columbia. So that should be super cool. So
that's awesome. What a dream.
Yeah, it'll be cool. I mean, hopefully see some, fingers crossed, see some orcas. Definitely going to see wolf prints, maybe actual wolves. And there's lots of wolves out there. Maybe some otters, maybe mink. Bald eagles are everywhere out here, which is someone for you, Michaela, like myself, who grew up in the East. People here don't care. They treat it like it's a gull. Don't care. But I'm just like, it's so cool to be out here. It's the first time I've been on the West Coast. So for those listeners who live out here, you know what I mean. But for people who are as old as me, 752 years old, on the East Coast, when I was young, we were in carriages, but also there were no bald eagles. It was like they're just not there. And now, like in the East,
people like me, we see them all the time.
I mean, in the East, we see them a bit now. So I think people who are young, like you, Michaela, it's not as crazy. But, for me, it's really cool to see them out here. So I guess it just shows you the perspective.
What is that bird?
What is that bird? Yeah, no idea. It's America's bird. What are you talking about? Yeah.
It's America bird. It's America's bird. It's like
you have a loud, obnoxious, locally overpopulated, garbage-eating, stealing, thieving eagle.
Birds. Literally, they're trash birds.
They are though. Like they're beautiful. But like you guys should have picked golden eagle. It's a significantly better eagle.
Right? I'm just like, why the bald eagle? Like all I see is they flock around when we ever discard a fish. The damn trash bird.
True.
Then
totally
you
true.
heard the
golden eagle is badass as well.
So much.
And it's like that's a bald eagle. That's what it is.
Yeah, no. Golden eagle plus 10 over bald eagle. But anyways, I've trained them both. I've worked them both. Like them both. But come on, golden eagles. Yeah. Anyway, so we could have the eagle debate, which of course I could easily be part of for an hour. I'd love that. But I guess we should probably stop boring the listeners, whoever's still here 4 minutes in. And introduce our guest this week. Our guest is going to be Spahr, and she's a wildlife illustrator who, I'll be honest, as a lot of our guests, I found her through Instagram and really like her work and chatted with her and asked if she'd like to join the show and sort of discuss, a very different side of conservation. She'll be the first guest that we've had on to talk about, art and scientific illustration and how that can impact and be useful in conservation and science, and also how you get into that field. And I'm excited because, like I said, it's something I really other than having looked at illustrations in books, like we all have, I don't know anything else about it. So it's going to be, I think, a really super interesting interview to get that perspective and to hear her side of how she did it. And then, I don't know what her story is going to be, but listen to how her story, what her field story is as well. So I'm really excited for her to join us today.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be different, and I'm excited to have a new twist on experience the scientific world. So
absolutely. All right, let's go. All right, hey everyone. So our guest is Jay Spahr, and she is a scientific illustrator based in New Hampshire. Her work has taken her different parts of the world: Norway, Sweden, Netherlands, around the United States. And I've followed her work on Instagram for quite a while now, and really impressed by obviously the work she does, illustrating, but also the way she expresses the content and communicates it. And we reached out to her to see if she'd be interested enough to join us in the show. And thankfully she said yes. So Jay, you're our guest. Welcome to the show. And we're really excited to have you on. You're actually the first, illustrator, kind of wildlife artist illustrator we've had on the show. And I think it's a really important part of conservation and communication. And I'm really super excited to have you on and share your work with us.
Awesome. Well, I am super honored to be here. Thank you, especially representing the sort of artistic community with science, because obviously I think that those things combine so perfectly in so many ways, in so many research papers, and we all have biology textbooks, and that we are looking at reference images constantly, and people say, oh, I didn't even realize that was a career. But we've all been looking at scientific illustration since we were in grade school, looking at textbooks. And I started out my life as an art historian and environmental scientist. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had always been a painter, an artist, but never really considered myself very creative, I guess. And I really wanted to just use my ability to communicate with visuals for, the benefit of the environment, rather than painting things that represented the complex relationship I have with my family, or something that I feel like a lot of contemporary artists are doing. I don't consider myself an artist, so I was struggling to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was the assistant for a professional artist. I did all of her sculpture work, and I was at our town garbage dump in New Hampshire and found a biology textbook in the garbage. Not that I hadn't seen one before, and I thought, this would be a really cool thing to do with whatever small amount of talent I have and the ability to illustrate. And I looked into scientific illustration as something to pursue a master's degree in. Found a program that I really loved in the Netherlands and spent 2 years there doing research and illustrating both human and animal anatomy. And now I graduated in 2018. So here I am a few years later working full-time as a freelance scientific illustrator. I predominantly create graphics for science centers, outdoor graphics that you might see on a nature trail or at a science museum explaining an exhibit that they have, interactive stuff. And I hope that my images are as accessible as they can be to the general public. That's my goal.
Wow, that's epic. Oh, that's so cool. Well, as someone who did a drawing of an aardvark for my dissertation presentation recently, I could have definitely done with some good ones. And I think we're all wondering how long it takes to actually do a piece of work like that, because I know a few people would love to get into it, including myself, to be honest. But my curious first question would be sort of the timescale, the pressures, that sort of thing.
It's so incredibly variable, because a lot of people come to me, scientists who want a graphical abstract, so an image representing what their research is going to be, so that people can understand it at a quick glance what their research might be about, from the study of brown bears to physiology of humans, various things. And I usually do that digitally, but I start with sketches and then share them back and forth. And sometimes I have email chains with clients that are 100, 200 emails long where people are saying, well, could you change the cellular structure of that to be like this? And so it's a constant back and forth. So I would say at a minimum, the most simple illustration takes 5 to 10 hours, and at maximum, graphics that I make that are the life cycle of the bobwhite quail with 20 different species of plants that they utilize in their daily lives throughout their life cycle can take 50, 60, 70 hours of time.
Well,
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, fair, yeah.
I would say I'm not paid equitably for most of the things that I do because I work in the science world, as you know. But I'm also a perfectionist, so I try to cut myself off, before I get too nitpicky about things. But yeah, everything takes longer than you might imagine, whether it's a watercolor painting or a digital illustration that looks like a really simple line drawing, because my goal is accuracy. And that comes at the cost of time.
Sanity, probably.
Yes.
That's cool. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I was follow-up question.
We've let another big slip there.
Yeah. Sorry. There's a lot of things happening too. I was distracted. Yeah. So no, my question, since it's my turn, sorry, was yeah. What I mean, did you always have like artistic talent? Do you think this is something you had? Do you think this is something you really developed? I mean, this is coming from someone myself who has. I mean, there's 0 artistic talent, and then there's like -10, and I think I might be -20. So I know I have no artistic ability. Try, and I'm just wondering for you, like, is it something you think you had along? Do you think it's something you unlocked? Like, how did that process develop for you?
So I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire, but my dad was the director of collections and exhibitions for an art museum in New Hampshire. And they also had arts programming that I could go to during the summer and stuff. And so I think since I could hold, I mean, that's so cliche to say, right? Since I could hold a pencil, I've been drawing. But I think like my parents have, Crayola crayon drawings of stuff that I did, that my mom was like, look, it's your first scientific illustration. And it's like a drawing of a mosquito that I did. And it's so good that she can't tell which way is up. And I'm like, I look at it and I'm like, that's upside down. But I have always, I'm not a doodler. I can't doodle. In fact, like doing simple, like little, marginalia drawings when you're bored, I cannot do that. But if I really enjoy being able to sit down and draw something from references. Like when I create an illustration, I use 20, 30 reference images so that I get something that's representative of a species. And that's always sort of been what was interesting to me, was creating illustrations rather than creating true art that is like inherently creative. And I think that I was just always interested in, I took as many art classes as I could in high school. And if they had allowed minors in art in my college, I think I would have gone above and beyond the number of credits required for that. But then I kind of funneled myself into art history and really regretted it, and then found my way back to being an artist rather than in the, I was not interested in, delving into Greco-Roman architectural columns as much as I thought I was.
Oh, man. I love the idea of you being like a 4 or 5-year-old, instead of like doodling and messing around, you're drawing life realistic mosquitoes. That's amazing.
I love that, and I think that all of us have so many different types of hobbies, especially in this field. We have so many different interests when it comes to, for photography, to birding, to herping, to art. And to make that into a career is so wonderful. For me, I was wondering, what is your favorite type of style of art? What do you like digital art the best? What is your favorite process when it comes to drawing these scientifically created animals or I guess prints?
So if you asked my clients, their favorite thing would be digital illustrations that I create, which is most of what I post on Instagram. It's all digital illustrations that I create through Photoshop. And I don't know if you've ever watched any of my reels, but like I start on paper and draw really bad sketches and then hope that people will agree that that's enough to go off of to start a digital illustration. But for me, I really prefer watercolor. I mean, you guys, I'm sure know, since you all work in the field, I would way prefer not to be staring at a computer. And I spend so much of my time illustrating on the computer. Behind me, I have a 23-inch iMac, and I feel like 90% of my time is spent staring at that screen, drawing with my drawing tablet. And I hate that. So I try to do as many watercolor illustrations as possible. And that I tend to use my laptop if I need reference images or whatever, bring that outside or bring that somewhere else so that I don't feel trapped in my office, and do watercolor paintings. And that I really love that hand to eye connection rather than, even though digital, because I'm drawing on a drawing tablet and I see it on the screen, it just doesn't have that. I don't feel as creative because with watercolor, I have a watercolor palette that's this big and I can mix any color out of it. And even that, blows my mind, the ability to see a color and recreate it by mixing a bunch of colors on a palette. And when you're doing digital illustrations, you're like, you can use the color picker, or you can, select from every single possible imaginable color. And that feels like it takes the creativity out of it a little bit. So even though my watercolors are as realistic as I can make them, they still feel like they have some freedom to them because I feel like I get to be a little bit more creative myself, which I really like.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think we can all agree that between us, we spend too much time on computers inside. I mean, I edit all the time. I mean, I spend way more time doing that than anything else. But I was just going to ask you on that note, really, how valuable is it for you to actually get into the field and see some of the animals the nature you're drawing, and like to be able to actually, feel that experience, see it in real life, and, be able to then recreate it, rather than, I assume you're not just drawing things that you've never seen before. I mean, sometimes maybe you are, but I'm just curious, like, how valuable is that experience for you?
It's really variable for the client and, my expectations of stuff. Certainly for any, wildlife veterinary stuff that I have done, it's really valuable to be in the field, to be able to see, what steps are actually being taken, and to be able to illustrate that process as many times as, scientists think that they can explain things. It is so much better to see things firsthand. A lot of things, though, I spend hours and hours collecting references, work with the scientists to collect all of the references that they have, and, create this conglomeration of all different images that I use because usually everything that I make is multi-part. That's like a life cycle or a representation of a multi-step process of some sort of animal's life or in some type of scientific research process. And the more I can get into the field to see that, the better. But usually that requires additional funding from whatever researchers, and usually scientific illustrators, are certainly more expensive than hiring a graphic designer to do something. So budgets for a lot of scientific research does not allow for me to do as much of that as I would like. And I certainly did that a lot more in the beginning of my career. And now, because I work freelance, I work for, like right now, I currently have 10 active projects for scientists all around the world. And the feasibility of traveling for all of those things is not possible. And, but honestly, it's mostly a budgetary issue for science institutions mostly. I've been really lucky. A lot of the reasons I've been to Scandinavia so many times, there's a lot of money in research in Scandinavia still, and that's been really beneficial. But in the US, certainly that is not, they're scraping by to have funds to get a scientific illustration at all, let alone to fly a scientific illustrator out to be in the field. Right. So I do my best with as many, references as I possibly can. If scientists can take videos, that's the best for me. I hate when I've done illustrations also of extinct species or species that have only been seen, a few times in the wild that have been used for textbooks and stuff to fill a gap in a list of, different variants in a species or something. And that's just impossible. And I'm doing, my best by reading 10 research papers showing different scale patterns for some type of lizard in French Guiana and, trying to get the correct number of scales around the eyes and stuff. And that is very challenging. But if I was in the field, I wouldn't be looking at them either because nobody else has seen them.
Oh, that's amazing. I feel it's funny, we have guests on who are so amazing. And sometimes I don't want to say we struggle for questions, but I feel like sometimes because we work in similar fields, at least for myself and maybe you as well, Michaela, sometimes there might be questions that we don't think about because we'll probably already know the answers in our head. But I feel like for you, I could probably ask you questions all day because this is so interesting to me. Yeah. So probably, I'll ask one more and then we'll probably need to sort of move on to this story. But I guess for me, again, in that same vein of your work being so, different to what I do on a daily basis in some ways, many ways. I'm curious about the whole process of, obtaining your degree and going through university. For someone else there who's listening, who might have the same kind of passion and interest and wants to pursue it. What advice would you have for them? And also, obviously I don't need the whole course structure, but generally, like, what is it like? Like, what do you do? Obviously I could envision it's every day you're just drawing things, but I'm assuming, I hope more of the education was just go in a room and draw. So there must have been more to it. Like, could you walk us through a bit about what that was like and maybe some advice for some people?
Yeah, of course. The first thing that I tell people when they ask about, I really love what you do. How do I become a scientific illustrator? I really think that having a background in, anatomy is really critical, and just jumping into claiming to be a scientific illustrator is not the same thing as learning about the intricacies of the human body and all different other anatomical systems for different types of creatures. So when I got to the Netherlands to do this program, the reason I chose it is it's the most hands-on program in the world. So we did a year of human anatomy. So basically the same as an anatomist for a medical textbook or something. We spent hours in the atelier dissecting humans and illustrating them. And then we spent a year dissecting animals and illustrating them. And part of the second year was your final research project, which was essentially choosing a scientific research topic that you were interested in and reaching out to scientists involved in it and offering to, for free, illustrate all their research in turn for them being your guide and telling you, when things were right and wrong. And then they would also be one of your advisors when you graduated to give you there was a group of professors, and then your advisor from the scientific field would also grade you on your research paper. So we ended up all writing a 45-page thesis filled with illustrations related to the topic that your researcher was studying. And then that was published at the end of the program. So I have 20 copies of that still because I have, but that was really cool. But yeah, it was just amazing every day was different. We would go to the anatomical theater and dissect, or one day we would draw live rats or, nude humans. And then we do anatomy classes with a professor of anatomy. So he would be teaching us in the same way that the med students were getting taught at the University of Maastricht. So we learned from him. And then we had art professors who were teaching us more about stylistic things. So we did digital stuff. We did 3D rendering. We did watercolor. we did botanical illustrations. So it was a little bit of everything. And then in the hopes that you would sort of be honing down by the end on maybe the style that you like and the topics that you were interested in.
Wow, that sounds awesome, actually. Damn, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Wow. That sounds like a pretty epic course, actually. Damn. Okay, that's super cool. Michaela just asked it and raised a good point too. In our little internal host chat, do you actually sell any of your prints? Like, what's that? I mean, obviously, I assume you get contracts, and that's one way that you support yourself. Obviously, probably the primary way. But do you sell on the side? Do you have like an online store, or how does that work?
So I may or may not have just sort of hired an assistant to help me with that, because people are always asking me that. Mm-hmm. I have a website, and it's scivisuals.com, like sci, like science.
Yeah.
And there's a part of that has prints and original watercolors. And back in the olden days of Instagram, before Instagram wanted to make everybody feel horrible about everything, I had a really easy time. I would post something. I would post a watercolor on my stories and say, if you're interested, message me. And I would sell everything within a day. And now I can't even promote one story about, anything. So that's a little bit of I don't do any other social media at the moment. So, trying to work full time as a scientific illustrator, creating graphics for science institutions while simultaneously peddling my wares as, all of the watercolors and things. Because I wind up with a lot of watercolor finals that I send digital versions to clients of if I'm creating a final graphic with multiple images. So I have drawers and drawers of, watercolors of birds, watercolors of all different species. And I have sold a lot of them over time, but it is definitely more difficult to try and juggle that with what I'm doing. So possibly, yeah. So, but I do sell prints too of things that I've made and shipping them out. And back in the olden days of Instagram, that I also used to be able to post that I had a print and then sell out within a few days and then send them all off. And now if you mention the word sell or sale or I have or whatever for you to buy, you kind of get shunted to the back of Instagram. So the algorithm knows what you're about and wants you to create a business profile with selling stuff directly on Instagram. So
oh really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
It's a whole different world, and it's somewhat challenging.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking into doing something because people are always like, "Oh, this would be really cool on a T-shirt," or "Would you ever do a hat of this?" And I'm just worried that I'm going to be that person who has 600 shirts in their house that they haven't sold.
Yeah.
So I would like to find a company that can just print something on demand or whatever, and it's more hands off.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who would buy. I mean, I collect a lot of art, illustrative art. One of my friends actually who lives in New Hampshire, he does Stonebridge art. He does illustrative art as well.
I'm really Matt, yeah, he's a really. I just visited him this past weekend actually. He's a good friend of mine too, and so I collect a lot of his art, and I love a lot of the scientists, friends of mine and colleagues. We all collect like wildlife art and scientific illustrations as well. So I know that's like very popular right now, and I know people who just love the outdoors will collect it too. But obviously, it's a lot more complicated with that, and there's a lot more logistics, and I'm not a very big business person, especially with Instagram. So, but I think that a lot of people would love your work, and I've seen your work and it's beautiful. So at the end of the day, if it's possible, I think it would be worth it. I'd buy it.
Yeah.
But that's what everybody says, and then when it comes down to it, you're like, oh, I sold 1.5 T-shirts.
Right. I know.
Yeah,
and
I understand.
comes down to the algorithm.
Yeah. So that's why it's juggling the career as a scientific illustrator, creating graphics for institutions versus placating my social media people.
Absolutely.
And I want to do both, which is why maybe I will ask somebody for a little bit of help to assist me in that. But at the moment, it's a challenge to juggle that.
Do what you got to do.
Well, that's cool. Maybe there's some way to, who knows, maybe there's some kind of like wildlife illustrator collective kind of thing that could happen where everybody has one source where they can order from, and everybody can join forces on that. Even I don't know, who knows? But
That's cool too. Yeah.
Yeah, because it sounds like you have a friend there, and I'm sure there's a few other. I don't think it's a huge community, and maybe everybody could invest in it a bit, and then there'd be this really one online store for every one place. Because if I knew I could go online and order up, $25 shirt with super cool scientific graphic, and especially if I knew one of the artists and kind of had some backstory to it, it'd be like super cool. I would absolutely buy that in a heartbeat. So so. Well, that's really cool. That's been, in terms of like learning about your career, your background. I mean, that's super interesting to me. It's probably like a whole new world that you're right. Like the only exposure I think most of us would have is like in a book, like not the behind the scenes. So that's awesome. I guess it's time in that episode to move into your field story. As always, we don't really know what it's going to be. So I'm curious. I assume maybe it's something, maybe Scandinavia, or maybe it's in the States, or I don't know. I'm curious. So let's go for it, Jay. Let's see what you got on the table today for us.
Okay, so a quick preface of why I chose this story. So I really wanted to study for my thesis brown bears and their application to human research, because in the medical community, for humans, everybody is so worried about what happens when humans are on bed rest, because they get disuse muscular atrophy, they get bed sores, they get osteopenia, osteoporosis from not using their bones, they get buildup of urea and kidney problems from not being catheterized or whatever. And bears spend 6 months of every single year curled basically in one position without moving, and don't get disuse muscular atrophy, don't have any kidney issues, don't suffer from any sort of similar problems that a human would in similar situations. So I really liked that as a thesis topic, because I wasn't going to be boxing myself into either doing natural history illustrations of one animal species and not doing humans. So I did humans and animals. So I found some scientists who were wildlife veterinarians in Scandinavia, in Norway, studying the application of brown bear physiology on human medical research. And they were very, very incredibly kind and so enthusiastic, and invited me to come and partake in their field studies for that year. And it was the very early spring, so there was 2 meters of snow, and it was in the middle of absolute nowhere in Sweden. This is the Scandinavian Brown Bear Research Project, so it's a collective between Norway and Sweden. They've been studying brown bears since 1984 and doing their winter captures. They do a few per year. All of the bears have radio telemetry collars, so they only study 2- and 3-year-old bears, because once a Scandinavian brown bear, even though they're not as aggressive as a grizzly bear, once they're over 3, they are powerful enough that they can overpower scientists. So the idea is that we go out with radio telemetry looking for these 2- and 3-year-old bears that have radio collars, and hoping to, find them in the den that they've been marked at. And we're trudging through 2 meters of snow. And I was really anxious to, start this. I'd done some other field research, but never in the middle of Sweden, in the middle of winter. Wake up in the morning for the first day. It's absolute, all of, the crystals all over the glass. It's the coldest day they had ever had in the history of the research project. It was negative 23 Fahrenheit when we woke up, so negative 25 Celsius, or a little bit less. And they were considering canceling because it was so cold. I had 2 pairs of long johns on with a pair of wind pants and a pair of sweatpants and a pair of snow pants. And I had two pairs of long underwear tops on with a sweater that I had bought when I was there because I was so worried that I was going to be cold, a wool sweater, another jacket, and then another jacket on top of that, a giant scarf, another neckerchief, a hat on, and mittens, big ski mittens. And the guys who were going to be helping us find the bears, it's a really interesting collective of local people who are letting you onto their properties and stuff. So there's guys going around on their snowmobiles wearing seal mittens and stuff, all, to stay warm. And we arrive about a 20-minute trudge from the first brown bear in its den. So these are all bears that are in their dens, 2 years old, and we have to be as quiet as possible. It's a larger group because there's a film company who's filming a documentary about the research that's there simultaneously. So we're trying to trudge up as quietly as possible because the goal is to not disturb the bear until the scientist with the dart gun arrives right in front of the den. So they sneak up and the bear comes bursting through the snow, takes off through the snow, and it's this tiny little, I guess my size bear, but running through 2 meters of snow. And they're really, really worried because the bear shouldn't wake up that fast in the middle of their hibernation period. They're worried that it's going to get hypoxia, various other problems, and they lose the bear. And then one member of the team from the documentary sends a drone up and finds it, and all of the guys go running off to go look for it and bring it back, dragging it over the snow. And I'm suddenly there thinking, I feel absolutely just horrified that we're doing this to this 2-year-old bear, this little female bear who's been chased out of her den in the middle of the winter, all these clots of snow all over her coat and stuff, to be, taken like 25 vials of blood for research and tissue samples, and then set back into her den. And basically 95% of the bears leave the den after the one that they put them back into the den that they found them in. But most of the disturbed bears, when they wake up from the anesthesia, go and find another location. And they've never had, a catastrophic failure where the bear dies of exposure after that or anything. But it was a very intense experience. And I felt a lot more, I was sort of trying to be as open-minded as possible, but I really felt for the little bear being exposed to the elements in the middle of its, cycle of hibernation, having all these tissue samples taken from it. But it was absolutely fascinating. And the fact that this whole group of 20 different people found a way to find the bear that had run away, a half mile away in the snow. But and then we had, the next day was canceled completely because it was so cold that the scientists who were taking the samples' fingers were freezing to all of the medical tools, so that they couldn't do any of the samples. So it was canceled.
Wow,
it was pretty intense.
What was the conclusion of your thesis? Did you kind of find out why they didn't, experience muscular dystrophy or, bed sores during hibernation?
So that's all constantly still being researched by this group and a bunch of other scientists in other areas as well. It's not, there's no specific conclusion. There's a lot of evidence that it has a lot to do with the way that they are hyperphagic before they go into hibernation. So they eat all of this food and gain all of this fat reserve right before they go into hibernation. And that really changes their physiology as they're going into hibernation. But in the same way, if a human ate that way, eating, 8,000 calories a day would not be a sustainable solution. So that is, the research is ongoing.
Wow, interesting. It's a really interesting story and interesting point you raise. Of course, the whole when it comes to research, the ethical side of it, and trying to find out where the line between what you need to get for data for the project versus what's going to impact the animal's life. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that they haven't had a fatality from that. I mean, these animals are tracked, as you said, right? So they would be able to monitor if they did have that. Yeah. I mean, what is when they cancel? Do they cancel? I mean, not to really hammer down on this project because I know it's not your project, but from your knowledge when you were there, do they cancel for temperature based on their own sort of well-being as researchers, or is it more for the animal? Or is it, I mean, I guess alternatively, maybe if it's warm, it's almost, I don't know, maybe that's in some ways worse for the animal because maybe the animal has more trouble going back into hibernation when it's really warm. I mean, I know it gets really complicated. I just wonder if you know more about their methodology, just to elaborate on that story.
Yeah, for sure. The decision was definitely twofold. They were definitely deciding for the safety of the veterinarians who, were conducting all the research with no gloves on, and surgical gloves, but then the water condenses inside them, and then they're even colder. But definitely, I think 75% of the decision was because of the safety of the bears, and the community of people who were involved in the project is sort of 50% people who are medical doctors who are studying human medicine, who are interested in looking at field samples while we were in the field. They'd be getting an adipose sample and looking at it under the microscope while we were out kneeling in the snow and doing like an echocardiogram in the middle of the snow. And that was failing too, because it was so cold that all the batteries of all of these things were dying. And it was definitely sort of a fight between the veterinarians and the medical community who wanted, because if you only have we did 3 bears the first day, I think. And then they were losing 3 additional bears that they were going to get the next day. And they were worried about lowering the number of samples, because then obviously, they're not getting as large a data set as they had anticipated. So there was definitely a little bit of like, well, we're already all the way out here, in Tokos in Sweden. Everybody had driven like 8 hours through a blinding snowstorm to get there, including me. So I think it was a really challenging decision to be made, but it was definitely, there was definitely pushback for the safety of the animals for sure as well. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, fieldwork is not, again, it's one of the things that we want to get across in the show too, is fieldwork's not, the results seem so clean and easy, but the actual process of getting that data is rarely simple. So, no, that's really cool. It's super, super interesting story. Looks like Michaela's neighbors have gotten home. There we go. So yeah, she's about to be arrested, and so. That was awesome, Jay. Thank you so much. Really cool background about your work. Really cool explanations. Awesome story. I feel like I said we could have continued to ask questions the whole time. But yeah, I guess we should probably wrap it up before Michaela's taking off the handcuffs. And yeah, again, really awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. I know, like you said, it's hard to sell things on Instagram these days, but we can at least share your profile, share your information on our Instagram. And yeah, I think anybody watching the show definitely be interested in seeing how they can maybe get some of that merchandise, that merch, if it's available in the future. So it was a real pleasure having you, Jay. Thank you so much for taking the time out of this Memorial Day weekend Sunday to speak to us.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So many questions, but... Anyway, the distractions are here now.
We'll do a follow-up.
Yeah. No, actually, it would be great to have you on again in the future too. I'm sure we'll. I feel like after our first year, we're definitely going to be recycling some of the guests in a good way, not in a bad way, in a good way. Yeah, it sounds like a bad thing, but it's actually a great thing. It just I feel like we have so many great guests already in the first year that we'll definitely want to check in with some of you again. So awesome.
Well, good luck, Michaela. With
good, no worries. Sorry, I think it's all good.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up there. We'll take care, Jay. Thank you again so much.
Hi guys. Nice to meet you guys all.
All right. Well, that was great. I mean, I really enjoyed that. Like I said, I feel like we could have just continued asking questions about the process, the inspiration. I mean, I had a whole bunch of follow-up questions. I'm sure both of you did as well. And yeah, I just found it really interesting. I mean, to me, one of the things, we didn't really get to say in the interview because just, not enough time. But to me, it just really highlights how there are so many ways that people can be involved in conservation and science and research. It doesn't always have to be, the standard thing that people think about, it doesn't have to
Right.
be some white guy in a lab in a white coat or some, researcher with the standard, tourist type shirt out there doing something with his safari hat. It can be so many different shapes and sizes and colors of people. It can be so many different types of work. And I mean, I even like obviously the work that you did, Nick, and other people like Zach and that world from last week. That's also important. It's also important as long as we're all pulling in the right direction for the right reasons. It's really, really, really awesome, really cool, really interesting background. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
100%. I mean, go on, Michaela.
Oh, I was going to say, you hit the nail on the head, Chris. I mean, as I progressed in the wildlife field, when I started, I just thought, when you are working in wildlife, you're either a biologist, a technician, or you just work in conservation. And as I've grown older, I realized you can be in community science, you can be an artist, you can be a photographer, a videographer. You can do so many different things to participate and add towards being a steward in nature. And just listening towards to her journey in wildlife art and scientific illustration is beautiful, actually. And it's something that I know that I have fellow biologists and colleagues who actually want to get into it. So to see how she got there, and it's always fascinating because I look at other fields and I'm like, I don't understand how they get there, and I'm sure they look at my field and they're like, I don't even know what do you even do with turtles? And I'm just like, oh, it's super easy, obviously. And so, just to see how she got there is really fascinating to me, to see that, like when I think about art, I'm like, oh, she's just going out to nature and just sitting there and, just picturing, a bear, and then we're waiting for a bear to come up. But she's actually participating, learning about the anatomy and the history. I'm just thinking, I was like, oh, she's going la di da di da. There's a bear. I'm gonna draw it, But like, it's really, she's intimate. She's being personal. She's, learning the science behind it. And I think that is just really astonishing. That she's being so personal in understanding the science, the anatomy behind it, the research behind it. So it's it's very facultative, and I think it's just really awesome that she got to explain that, especially for other people who may be interested in that field and not even aware that that's a very a possibility. So awesome.
Yeah,
it's really
fascinating. I mean, just going off of that, like that resonated a lot with me because I've been having a chat with quite a lot of my friends are graphic designers at university too, with aspirations to be involved in nature and conservation. And one of my friends actually turned around to me the other day. I was like, I'd love to do scientific illustration. So I'm going to put them straight in the direction of this episode. And obviously to get in contact with Jay, because I feel like they could have some great conversations. But even just in their early career, I mean, they won't mind me saying it. I haven't said any names, but we're in early collaboration talks about a book, for me getting some photos and then getting some like creative drawings to go alongside it that I couldn't capture. And the time scale of how she was saying how long it would take for each thing it's really crazy to think about sort of how much intricacies involved. So yeah, it was a great episode. I loved that one. I could ask hundreds of questions for it.
I know. More. I definitely want to get some of her art too. I kind of want to make the trip to like visit her and see, what she does and kind of watch, her process as well.
You want a live vlog of the whole day's work.
Yeah. No, I think it's super cool. I think we would all, I mean, there's nothing better than a really well done t-shirt, especially, or, shirt, especially if it's a kind of scientific event. I mean, I think this community we work in would love that. So, but I also see her point. She doesn't want to be stuck with 1,000 t-shirts and only sell 50, it's tough. But yeah, I'm sure that there is some way to make it happen, because I think we can all do with more cool shirts that are related to nature for sure. So. Really? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Actually.
Well, that was great.
Did you make that shirt?
My friend, he owns he does a lot of wood art and illustration too. His store or Instagram is called Fifth Season in Michigan. And he made a Petoskey stone, which is a Michigan stone for people who don't know. And it's a Petoskey stone for the shell of a turtle.
Nice.
I know. He sent it to me recently. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
example of another wildlife illustrator. There we go.
I mean, I think I think that idea of it's like a network of people where you can go to one website and order what you like would be good, because instead of being all spread out, I think one place to go where everybody works together would be cool. But
I think that's
it's
a
not
great
my field,
idea.
but I think it would be cool. I think it would be.
Yeah.
And then you see like wildlifeillustration.org. I don't know what the hell it is, but just go there and you just do your searching and shopping and it'd be cool. But anyways.
Patent it, Chris. Patent it. Just start it and be the organizer, and then boom.
Rich. That's how I get rich. No, I'm kidding. As if there's any money in this.
What the hell?
There's no artistic talent. There's no money in this at all.
Yeah.
We're screwed.
Anyways, guys, that was great. I really appreciated it. Probably wrap up the show here before I get any crazy. Thank God it's only 11 a.m. There's no crazy wild drunken parties going on right now like last night. So yeah, probably should wrap it up before I get interrupted anymore.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Okay, guys. Well, we'll see you next week. I will be in the temperate rainforests of British Columbia, so maybe I'll be here, maybe I won't. We'll see. But I'm sure we'll have some kind of show next week, and we'll just have to tune in next week to find out.
The show will go on, definitely.
It will go on, yeah.